One time, I was walking home from the train station after I spent the weekend at my aunt's house. It was about 11 p.m. at night and very dark outside. When I was almost home, I noticed a guy on crutches in front of me who walked the same direction and then stopped every couple meters to turn around and look at me before continuing to walk on. Since he was walking with a limp, I quickly passed him. When I did, he stopped walking and grinned at me in a very creepy way. I kept moving. Since I lived in an apartment complex over a burger restaurant, for a moment I considered to ask one of the employees to walk me to the front door, because to get to the entrance of the apartment part of the house, you had to walk around the house into a dark court. Finally, I didn't ask, because I thought, what could possibly happen? This guy is on crutches, and I didn't want to come across childish. So, I was walking through the court of our house and wanted to pull out my keys while walking. Suddenly, I couldn't find them in my handbag. I realized I had thrown them somewhere in my travel bag because I didn't want to lose them from my handbag while staying at my aunt's and being out over with her all the time. So, still standing in the middle of the court, I had to search the whole travel bag for that damn key. I was so distracted by the whole key searching incident that I totally forgot about the creepy guy I had encountered before. When I finally pulled the key out of the bag, I looked up and the creepy guy from before was standing right in front of me, grinning. I always thought in a situation like this that I'd start screaming, but instead, I couldn't get myself to make any sound at all. With the keys in my hand, I started running to the front door, opened it, and jumped inside the house. The guy, still walking with a limp, followed me as fast as he could. Luckily, due to his injury, he wasn't as fast as me. Unfortunately for me, our front door was one of those doors that slowly fall into the lock automatically, but when you try to push them in order to shut them quicker, it pressures back and stops you from slamming it. So there I was, trying to push the door into the lock, while creepy guy was on his way to follow me into the house. Believe it or not, the door fell into the lock right in the second he reached the doorstep. Through the glass door, we just looked at each other, both breathing heavily from the race. He looked quite disappointed. I quickly ran upstairs to my apartment and locked myself in it. Later that night, I looked outside my window and I saw the same man walking up and down the road in front of the house. He stayed there for about 3 or 4 hours after the incident. I can't tell you what it was that made me not call the cops. I guess I was like, after all, nothing happened. What can they do about it? After that, I didn't feel safe in my home anymore because I knew that he knew where I lived. I only left my apartment when being packed up or dropped off and made sure to be home before it was turning dark every day for 2 weeks. Finally, I decided to go to the police and tell them about it to ask whether they can keep a special eye on the neighborhood for a bit. I went to the police station, and it happened exactly what I feared. They took notes and said, we can't really do anything about it now. You should have called before, but we'll make a note. A couple days passed, and suddenly I get a call from another police officer who asked me a lot about what happened. He then tells me that they've been looking for the guy on crutches for months already, because he molested several girls in our town, followed them into their apartments, and even slept in front of their doors. He had been in police custody before, but got out and violated probation. He had some kind of mental illness, too. The police officer told me to immediately call in case the guy showed up again. Luckily, he never did. It was only then that I understood the seriousness of the situation and realized that I most likely escaped an attempted assault in some sort of way by just an inch. I, in a way, really didn't believe myself that the whole thing had actually happened, before the police guy called me back anyway. This was 5 years ago, but I still think about it from time to time, and it still gives me the creeps. Hey, creepy guy, let's never meet again. So this only happened yesterday. It's been driving me crazy. It's not as wild as other stories on here, but it's by far one of the creepiest things that's ever happened to me. So my husband and I are walking home from having a beer at a local pub around 6 p.m. In terms of setting the scene, We live in a small New Zealand town, population approximately 2,000, that's filled with a real mixed bag in terms of residents. Older folk, meth heads, low income, but increasingly commuters from our capital city have been settling here. We fall into the latter category. It's spring here, so it was still plenty light and we're just chatting as we walk the 10 minutes or so home. About 3 minutes into the walk, at the first intersection on our walk, I spot a cat sitting on a fence of one of the corner houses on the other side of the street from us. I say meow, and it meows back. It then starts stalking a bird, so my husband and I continue watching this house, the cat really, as we walk past. Suddenly, a person with a brown paper bag mask on their head kind of stumbles out of the front door of this house into the yard. Their mannerisms and how they're moving are so strange, but not what I'd associate with being drunk. The house itself seems completely dead, so there's no party on it or anything. The person then turns to us and makes eye contact. Well, the eye holes in the mask are staring at us, and they slowly start backing away to the front door alcove of the house and disappear from view into the alcove. We've been slowly walking this whole time, and at this point I have literal goosebumps and an intense sense of dread. When I write it down, it sounds so silly, but there was something so creepy about this person. We're still looking as we walk past the house, and the paper bag face slowly emerges from the alcove, watching us before disappearing from view again. As we walk and get further and further away, we keep turning around to look, and the same happens over and over again. Nothing, and then slowly but surely the paper bag face emerges out to watch us. This continued until we were at the end of the street, some 350 meters, and rounded the corner out of sight. It still makes my skin crawl thinking about it. My husband laughed and said it was probably some kid getting ready for Halloween or fucking with us. And he's probably right. But I had to keep turning around to watch my back for the rest of the walk home because I was so creeped out. In my late teens and early 20s, I was friends with a girl named Lucy. She was a very lonely kind of girl whose parents were, well, honestly, really shitty parents. Her mother was verbally abusive, and her father really couldn't care less about anything. Because of the lack of love in her life, Lucy searched through dating sites for love and comfort from strange men, and she was not afraid of meeting them face to face, even if they'd been chatting for only a few days. My friendship with Lucy was a strange one. I found her quite annoying sometimes, but I also felt awful for her because of her loneliness and lack of friends and love in her life. Sometimes I really didn't want to hang out with her, and some days I would accept her offer to hang out. When it was just her and I together, she was normal and okay to be around, but also very appreciative of having someone giving her attention. We had a small group of friends, and she would try to get all of us together as often as possible, and honestly, the whole group together was really quite fun. When we were all together, Lucy was very hyper, and you could just tell that she was happy to be around people who didn't insult her as her mother does. Suddenly, Lucy tells us she has a boyfriend. We were all surprised because we knew she had met a bunch of guys online, but we had never heard her say anything about dating anyone. A few days later, she sets up a day for our friend group to meet Trevor. None of us were looking forward to it because we thought he was going to be like all the others, a temporary boy toy. When we met him, we all felt awkward. He barely spoke a word. He wouldn't look directly at any of us at all. Lucy would try to be funny, but he would just give her dirty looks. Needless to say, we thought he was a weird one and could tell he didn't care much for her. As the days went on, Lucy kept telling me how much Trevor did not like me. This was weird because no one ever disliked me. I'm always polite, respectful, and I smile a lot at everyone, but for some reason, he did not like me. She kept saying he thinks I am using Lucy for her money. Not sure how he thought that, since I paid for everything for Lucy. To keep this piece of the story short, I think he was trying to find reasons to convince her to get rid of me. I got a terrible vibe from Trevor. He dressed like he didn't care about life. He never smiled. He didn't shake our hands when first meeting us. He stank of weed and really had an overall uncomfortable feeling about him. After months of Trevor trying to convince Lucy that I'm a terrible friend and she should not hang out with me anymore, she started to do as he said. She would start to hide me from him. If she and I were together and he would call her on her phone, she would lie and say I wasn't there. If she was with the group of friends, he would have her swear I wasn't there. When he was going to be joining the group on an outing or just hanging out at her place, she would tell me I couldn't come. Lucy will do whatever a boyfriend says just to keep pleasing him so she doesn't lose them. Now here's where it gets scary. Lucy calls me one day and says she wants me to come hang out at her place. I agreed. She came to pick me up, we went to her house and watched TV for a bit. We then decided since it's a nice day outside, we would take her 2 dogs for a walk to a nearby pocket park and would later return to the house to have lunch together. While at this park, she receives a phone call. Now, let me say that Lucy is not a private person whatsoever and has never, ever walked away to answer a phone call until this day. She walked far enough away that she knew I would not be able to hear anything she said. This was suspicious to me, but not enough to question it. The call ends and she begins walking toward me with a look on her face as if she is trying not to smile. She tells me, "So, I need to bring you home now." I was slightly confused as we had only been together for about an hour, when we usually spend the entire day together, and she would never want me to go home. She would even frequently beg me to sleep over to avoid being alone. So anyway, I said okay and we walked to drop off her dogs at home, and we got into her car and off we went. About 10 minutes into the car ride, I realized she wasn't going in the direction of my house, so I questioned it. "Where are we going?" She smirked, but didn't respond. I asked again, laughing uncomfortably. "Seriously, where are we going?" She continued to smirk, but didn't want to answer me. I started to realize she was heading in the direction of where her boyfriend lived. Oh, hell no. I asked one last time with anger in my voice, "Where are you taking me?" Her only response was bone-chilling to me. "Trevor wants to talk to you." Nope, I wasn't having any of this. I insisted and demanded she let me out of the car. But with her evil smirk and same response, she said it again. "It's okay, he just wants to talk to you." I was furious at this point because this creepy guy who looks like he wants to kill someone, who also despised me, wanted to talk to me. Why can't he talk to me on the phone? Why do I need to go to his sketchy apartment? She absolutely refused to let me out of the car. She had locked the doors, as if I wasn't able to unlock my passenger door. I waited until she reached a red light. I grabbed her wallet from the back seat and took out her bus pass and bolted out of the car. I had no idea where I was or where the nearest bus stop was, but I was not about to let her crazy-ass boyfriend do whatever he wanted to me. She yelled for me to get back into the car, but of course I ignored her. She sped off furiously. I immediately blocked her number in my phone. I removed her as my friend on social media and immediately warned the group of friends not to talk to her because she had gone nuts. I have not spoken to her since that very day, and she also lost the other 5 friends of the group as well. After this situation, Lucy, I hope you're truly lonely now. I was 17 years old when this story happened to me 3 years ago now. I was working at an old pizza shop right on the edge of my town. For context, the town I was in is an affluent suburban town surrounded by a bypass which loops around the town. Around my town is some farmland and main roads, where all the blue-collar workers moved to after the town was gentrified 10 to 15 years back. This pizza shop was around for 20 years and was very catered to these same blue-collar workers. It's around 9 p.m. and a call comes in for 2 pizzas and a 2-liter of soda. I'm the only driver in, so I have to take the delivery out. It's about a 10-minute drive to get to this location. There I have to drive up a long gravel driveway that took 5 minutes to get up. My car really couldn't handle the gravel and how rough it was. Arriving at the place, I see a nice house and 2 barns plotted across the land, with wheat 5 to 6 feet tall surrounding the whole property. I've been really anxious around farms because of how creepy I think they are. Being at this place when I felt truly all alone really started to make my anxiety flare. I decided to call the number on the order because I have no idea where this guy wants me to go and drop off his food. After about another 5 minutes of absolute silence, the man picks up. He had a very deep and raspy voice, like he's been a career smoker, which didn't do anything to help me feel better. I was told to meet him at his truck, at the far barn on his property. I am now properly shitting myself, as my mind races of all the worst possible things that could happen to me. I pulled myself together and muster further into this guy's property. I see the man's truck as I round one of those cylinder storage units where I see his F-150 and him inside. Instead of getting out, I call him and ask him how we should do the transaction. In his same deep voice, he instructs me to get out of my car and put all of the food onto his truck bed. Since he paid with his credit card already, I thought this would have been over in 10 seconds. I do what he tells me to do and walk over to the passenger window so that he can sign his receipt. The man looks to be around his mid-40s, heavy-set, with a scraggly black beard and a trucker hat. I'm a pretty skinny guy, so with my mind already racing on being kidnapped or murdered, I really didn't feel safe around this guy. I ask him if he has a pin on him, because I forgot to bring one. I was pretty bad at my job, and he did not have any cash on him. He stares at me with his cold eyes and points into the back of his truck, saying to me, "If you ask me for a tip, I'm going to be sticking this tip down your fucking throat," where he has a double-barrel shotgun just in the back of his car. I'm frozen in fear as I'm registering that this man has just threatened to kill me. Not only that, but this is the second time this has happened this shift. Yeah, I kid you fucking not. The first time was because I messed up the address for a house, and a man in his 60s wearing a cowboy hat and a fucking WWE belt comes out and says he has the right to shoot trespassers when I was just trying to see if I was at the right house. The only thing I can muster out is, okay, and I get back into my car and get the fuck out of that farm. I was going so fast on that, I fucked up my car from my car bouncing around on that gravel path. I go 80 all the way back to the pizza parlor, where I tell my coworkers what happened. None of my coworkers took me seriously and just thought I was playing this up as a joke. I go home and forget about it pretty quickly, but a year later I'm working the lunch shift, and the same man calls and orders a pizza. Now at this point I'm refusing to take this order, but this was during COVID, and the place was on its last legs already, so management forced me into going anyway. It was only 1 to 2 p.m. on a Sunday, so at least my fear of the dark would be covered. I get there and the man is waiting for me at his actual house. He recognized me, and out of all the things started apologizing to me for what he said. He was excusing it, saying that he just started going through a divorce and was struggling with his emotions. I just wanted the whole thing to be over with, and he gave me a $60 tip for what happened. Still, to the man on the farm, I hope we never meet again. I went on a Tinder date some time ago while I was adjusting to a new city I had just moved to. I didn't really know anybody there, so I used some online dating apps to see the dating scene around town. I landed one from a girl that seemed just like an artsy hippie type of girl. We had a few exchanges through the Tinder app and then decided to meet up for a drink. I picked her up at her house and she greeted me at the door and gave me a hug. She said the name of a local bar she wanted to go to for us to chat and get to know each other better. I told her I would drive and proceeded to my car. The first red flag I noticed was when I walked to my car and opened the door. She had just followed me to the driver's side and was standing behind me staring. I looked at her blankly for about 15 seconds and asked her if she was going to get in. She said, "Sure, I would love to," and went the long way to the passenger side around the back of the car. Since I had just met the girl, I figured she had just smoked some weed or something, as I had kind of got that vibe she was a bit of a stoner. As I was driving to the bar, she talked in a very low voice, almost as if she was trying to whisper. I'm not hard of hearing or anything, but I had to ask her to repeat herself several times just so I could make out the full sentences she was saying. When we got to the bar, I made sure we got a seat closer to the back, away from most people, just so I could have a little quiet in order to hear her. The conversations honestly carried on as normal from this point, and it was actually a fun time for the time being. We talked about different things we were both interested in, and she did bring up that she occasionally used recreational weed and a few other tripping substances like shrooms and such. I'm not much of a fan of these, but at least it made me relax a little in the back of my mind to think she was just high off marijuana, and that rationally explains some of the out there behavior. Granted, I had a few drinks at this point, so I was honestly not thinking straight. I asked her if she wanted to go to my place after drinks, and she agreed. When we got to my place, we had a few more drinks. Then she started talking about her jewelry. This is where it gets weird. She told me her jewelry was her big secret and it defined her. When I asked her why it was so important, she said, "I'm actually Anastasia, and I was never killed in Russia. My jewelry is a link to my past." It was hard for me to take that serious at this point with how much I drank, so I kind of challenged that statement using a little bit of what I knew about the history. At this point, she freaked out and started yelling at the top of her lungs about how I don't respect ancestors and history. Then she got quiet and tiptoed right up to me and grabbed me by the neck. She then brought my face eye to eye with hers while still holding my neck. She says at this point, "I am a shaman and I will curse you. My ancestors have destroyed many people and you do not respect that. You are from oppressive ancestors and they will be punished." Then she put her hand in a whiskey glass and made a cross on my face and kissed my forehead. At this point, I started to sober up a little. I talked her into calming down, telling her I was only joking. Then she slowly started getting back to normal. Then she started talking about her cat fetish. She tells me she has a list of people who she tames to act as cats. I am not about judging people on their fetishes, so I listen in. She then tells me all the things she does to them and starts acting like a cat in my living room. If she had not yelled at me earlier on, I might have almost been turned on by it. My red flags in my head were tingling like crazy at this point, so I just listened and tried not to set her off. She noticed sage on my kitchen counter and asked me to let her light it and bless the house. Side note, I used to sage to make my house smell better occasionally. It's kind of a ritual I like to do, but it's mine and mine own, something I take very personally and like to do myself. I tell her no, she can't light it and it's my thing to do on my own. Then she freaks out again, telling me I am a horrible human being and screaming all over the place. I tell her I can take her home now, and she runs to the door and goes outside. As I get outside, she is screaming at the top of her lungs that I am a horrible person and I should go die. I tell her she can walk herself home then, and then I go back to my place and lock the door. She then starts banging on the door hard in about 10 minutes, saying she left her phone in there. I grab her phone off the kitchen counter and open the door to hand it to her. She tries to barge inside and I block her with my forearm. She then acts like she was about to punch me. I just hold my ground and I tell her she is not coming in. She screams she wanted the whiskey bottle we were drinking from. I told her hell no, because I paid for that damn thing. I slam the door at this point and lock it. I hear her bang on the door for a minute. I then hear her footsteps going down the stairs. I waited about an hour and then went walking outside to see if she was still hanging around. I didn't see her anywhere, nor did I ever see her again after that. I know this is probably not the scariest encounter ever, but for the next few nights I was creeped out always walking around the area I lived to make sure she wasn't hanging around. I honestly hope she's okay wherever she is, but I hope to never see her again. Alright, first off, I want to apologize if my English is a bit broken, as I'm not a native speaker, but let's move forward. When I was a kid, my mom worked as a teacher and she was very close to a coworker of hers who had a son around my age and of whom I, as well, was very close. When my mom or her friend would head out for the night, the other would take care of both of us kids, and basically, it meant I spent half my time over there and my friend spent half of his time at my house, which was perfect and fun for both of us. We lived in different cities, but since that kind of system had been going on pretty much since forever, I grew up knowing my friend's city just as well as mine. His mom was well aware of that, so that being said, whenever we were going on a walk in their area, she'd let us wander around because she knew we'd always find our way back to her. My mom, though, was more cautious and always kept an eye on us, as she'd walk behind us to make sure she was always able to see us. I just wish her friend would have done the same. One day, I had to be around 6 or 7. We were going on a walk with my friend Marcus and his mom Katie. It was a very sunny day, and I was wearing a dress with embroidered flowers, and I had my blonde, long hair down. I often heard I was a pretty kid, even from strangers in the street, and besides making me and my parents somewhat uncomfortable, nothing bad ever happened. During that walk, Katie was walking ahead of us, and I was chatting and just fooling around with Marcus, when he suddenly remembered something urgent to tell his mom. As urgent as something can be for an 8-year-old boy. He ran up to her and left me strolling behind for a couple minutes, just as it already had happened 100 times prior. That time, though, we were circling around a big camping site, and we walked by the white vans and camping cars. One of those vans had its back doors open, and there was a man, probably in his late 40s, smoking a cigarette and leaning on his vehicle. He locked eyes with me as I was approaching, then saw that Katie and Marcus weren't paying much attention to me as they were already a couple meters ahead. Then he proceeded to pull me by my arm close to him, and so I found myself with my body touching his, so weirded out that I didn't even say a word, although I knew Katie would have heard me if I called for help. He leaned toward me as he was obviously much taller than I was, muttering something I didn't get, and he winked at me and kissed me on the lips, and then pulled me into the open doors of his van. At this point, if he had pushed me just a little, I would have fell into the truck. I was just too scared to even lift a finger, and even though I didn't understand everything that was going on, I knew it wasn't okay. He put his hands on the doors as to close the vehicle, and I felt my heart sink. At that exact moment, some other man jogged towards us, in his 40s as well, waving hello to me and saying something along the lines of, "I lost sight of you for a bit." I was so scared. He had a very friendly look on his face and was staring at me with great insistence and with a huge reassuring smile, and the van man awkwardly laughed and yanked me out of the way of the car, slamming the doors shut. I ran to Katie as I heard the van go off and just acted as if nothing had happened. To this day, I never told that story to anyone, not to Katie or Marcus, not to my mom, nobody. I'm 22 years old today. So, to the friendly guy who obviously didn't lose sight of me or whatever, but just probably saw everything and wanted to interfere, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. To the pedophile who surely would have abducted me and who was strangely okay with kissing a kid in public in broad daylight, I'm not even in the mood to add anything to what happened, but everyone thinks the same thing as I do, and I wish you hell. And let's not ever meet again. Although I think I'd be too old for you anyway. Just a quick backstory. I've had a stalker for about 4 years. He was never aggressive or sent me proper threats, so stubborn as I am, I did my best to ignore him and not give him the satisfaction of showing him any fear. To be honest, after a while I also wasn't scared anymore since he almost never came close to see me. I know being stalked can affect people severely, even in a case like mine, and that's totally valid. But I guess I just got lucky and was never really psychologically affected by it. His stalking behavior mostly just consisted of sending me letters and gifts, such as photos of my own apartment building from the outside, things he dug out of my trash can, and so on. I called the police many times, but they weren't able to, or really tried to be honest, catch or identify him. About 3 weeks ago, I discovered the German version of subreddit IAMA and thought that people might want to know about what it's like to have a stalker. Since I barely use any social media aside from Reddit and have no personally identifying information here, I didn't think he'd ever see it. One person even asked, "Does he know you're putting him on blast on Reddit?" And I answered, maybe. Maybe it would make him angry. Maybe he'd be turned on. Don't know, don't care. Well, I know the real answer now. He did see it, and he did not like it. Like I said, he was never aggressive and never came close to me. The closest I know of was when he sent me a picture of myself, unlocking my apartment door, taken from the corner of the steps above. Sorry if that makes no sense. I don't know how else to explain it. But I consider myself a pretty vigilant person, and I'm thinking that he might have hid a camera there instead of being there to take the photo himself. I think I would have noticed him if he did. I don't know how he got wind of the AMA, but he did. The next week was quiet, no letters, and I didn't see him anywhere. Then he left me letters with printed out questions and my answers from the AMA. He also left me a long, hateful letter towards my boyfriend about an issue I had posted on the German version of AITA. His letters were never hateful like that before, though he never seemed happy with my boyfriend. He wrote about how I should share the spotlight with him since I got so much attention thanks to him. A few days later, I got a gift, but this time he didn't leave it in the mailbox or at my car like he usually did, no. This time he left it inside the apartment building right in front of my door. I didn't take it inside my apartment, but opened it outside. It was a pretty big box, which was also unusual, and it was taped shut. As I'm typing it out, I realized that wasn't a good idea at all, and could have ended badly for me. But luckily, he didn't send me a bomb or anything. He did, however, send me several zip ties, a roll of tape, the kind you use to tape off walls when painting, nothing you could use to restrain someone, a TV remote with most buttons picked off, a pack of Band-Aids with a few used ones, not actually, just made it look like they were according to the police, and a framed picture of me. I could tell the picture was taken a few days ago, and my boyfriend was next to me but cut out of the photo. The frame was shattered, and the package was full of glass shards, clearly more than just what could have fallen out of the frame, and they were also intentionally put inside the crumpled newspaper that was stuffed in there to keep it all in place. I called the police right away and gave it to them. They were more concerned this time, finally, thanks, and told me they'd send patrol cars more frequently. He didn't show up or leave me any letters or gifts for about another week and a half. But 8 days ago, it started again. I found letters in my mailbox where he wrote about how he wasted his time on me, how I haven't been appreciating his effort, how he was wrong about me being special. 5 days ago, I left my apartment in the morning and heard a crunch sound as I stepped on my doormat. He put broken glass under it in the night. I went off to work because I was in a hurry and was just going to make my boyfriend call the police, but then I found my car had also been vandalized. The sides were scratched, lights smashed, and the windshield had a phrase on it painted, "It's time soon, miss my last name." I went back inside and called the cops myself. They found the same phrase on a note under the doormat. This time they really took me seriously, which might have been because I was just pissed off at this point, which I made very clear. If, for some reason, you're like me and just too stubborn to be afraid of a stalker like mine, then all of this, the letters, gifts, photos, even the damn glass under my doormat, are just really annoying and inconvenient. But my car was useless to me now, and the threat scared even me. I did, however, have a dash cam in my car, and it caught everything. The police took the footage as evidence, even though the dash cam footage wasn't of high quality, and I had given them photos of him that were just as good before, but they said it's not good enough. And they told me they'd look into it further and promised to send more patrol cars again. Then it was quiet for another 2 days. Until 2 days ago. Someone rang the doorbell at just after 4 a.m. My boyfriend and I got up, and we were both hesitant, but I saw blue lights outside, and just as I got up, I heard them shouting, "This is the police. Please open the door." They told us they were called by one of our downstairs neighbors, who came home from his night shift about an hour earlier and heard someone else enter the building after them before the door fell shut. My neighbors know of my situation, and I've asked them to make sure they don't let strangers into the building. This neighbor then went into his own apartment and looked through the peephole. We have motion-activated lights in the stairway, so he waited to see if they turned back on, and they did. Then he saw a middle-aged man walk upstairs. Above this neighbor are only me and my boyfriend, and a single mom with 3 kids who probably won't be getting any visitors at 3 a.m., so he called the police. They came and found my stalker 1/2 floor above me on the stairs. He should have been able to see the cop cars since there's a little window up there, and they had their lights on, but he either missed them or wanted to get caught. They found a pocket knife on him, and he confessed to being my stalker right away. He's finally caught. They got him. It took 4 years, a provocative Reddit post, and one very vigilant and caring neighbor, but he's finally done. For now, at least. He's facing several charges, and I've collected every single piece of evidence over the past 4 years. I don't know what kind of outcome I can expect, but for now I finally got some peace. Today, at 9:30 p.m., for the first time in over a year, I took out the trash by myself in the dark. My boyfriend always did it just to be safe, but today I had nothing to worry about. Many years ago, before kids, rescue animals, a mortgage, and a husband, I was a travel writer in Europe. I did most of my trips alone. This story is about the first time I visited Prague. I'd never been to Prague, and the trip was last minute, so I had little time to prepare. My travel partner had dumped me in another country, and I was determined to make the best out of the trip by visiting a place I'd never been. Upon arrival at the train station, I visited the accommodation office and asked for a hostel not far from the center. In my early 20s, winging it was part of the fun. These days, I'm far less adventurous. The hostel they sent me to was a sprawling, crumbling, slate-gray Art Deco building on a nondescript street about a 10-minute walk to Stair Mezzo. The inside was probably beautiful at one time, but by the time I checked into it, it was full of a shabby, mismatched furniture and cheap stained carpet. Most of the light fixtures were broken, leaving everything but the lobby dark and gloomy. It smelled of standing water and dust. I found my room, a double for $12 per night, and made note of the fact that I had a roommate. She wasn't there, but on her side of the room there was a suitcase, dressed neatly folded across the back of a plastic chair, a scattering of makeup containers on the beat-up desk, and a stack of German fashion magazines on the bed. As I had no plans or goals on this impromptu trip, I spent the afternoon exploring Old Town Square, the Jewish Quarter, and Wenceslaus Square. I purchased some Czech crystals for my mom and painted eggs from a street vendor for myself. I also made reservations for a sunset dinner cruise for one. At around 6 p.m., I returned to my room to shower, change clothes, and unload my purchases. When I left my room about an hour later, there was no indication that my roommate had returned at any point during that day. After the cruise, I stopped at a tiny bar on Tinska and had a glass of wine. I had heard the horror stories about the dangers of Prague, but I felt no more trepidation than I did in any other large city. Sure, the cobblestone streets, fog rolling off the Vltava, backlit Gothic architecture, and winding alleys made me think of Jack the Ripper and Dracula, but in a good way. It was nearly midnight when I returned to my hostel, so I was surprised to find that my roommate still hadn't returned. That wasn't uncommon, though. Backpackers are a fickle lot. She could have gone on a short overnight trip, or just left her stuff behind, hooked up with a guy or girl, and was holed up at their place, or hanging out at another hostel. So I was surprised but not concerned. I took another shower before bed, however, and I was surprised to find that things in the room had changed up in my return. Her bed was neatly turned down. The magazines had moved to the nightstand, and the dress was gone. The strangest thing, though, was the addition of a pink, silky nightgown spread across the bed. My bed. Maybe she thought she had the room to herself? I didn't see how, though. My shopping bags, clothes, and toiletries were in plain view. I gently moved the nightgown over to her bed and settled in for the night as I wrote into my journal. I assumed she was in the shower or somewhere nearby, so I expected her to return shortly. After about an hour, though, her side was still empty. I needed to use the restroom before I went to sleep, so I made one last trip down the hall. The building was unusually quiet. There weren't a lot of regular sounds of chatty backpackers, the clinking of glasses, or music that would normally leak through the halls. There was nothing. It was hushed, like a church after a congregation has left. I found myself practically tiptoeing back. My room was at the near end of the hall, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the corridor was darker than before. The few working lights were blinking as they struggled to stay lit, and it reminded me of a funhouse. A tightness began to fill my stomach, and I subconsciously quickened my steps. There wasn't a soul behind me, yet I kept glancing back over my shoulder, convinced I'd see someone gaining momentum on me. The only sound was the soft thud of my flip-flops as they struck my soles. I was flooded with relief as I flung open my door, but it didn't last long. Everything was exactly as I left it, except for that silky nightgown, which was now back on my bed. Sleep came in fits and starts. I left the lamp on for a while, still convinced my roommate would be back, but the shadows it cast made the room even spookier. It was too dark with the light off. I'd finally slipped into a deep sleep when I suddenly heard the door open. A man stood in the darkened doorway, the hall light behind him showing just enough for me to see his contorted face. "I didn't mean to," he sobbed. "You have to help me." Too confused and disoriented to be scared, I sat up, scrubbed my eyes, and reached for the lamp switch. But once the room was lit, I saw that the door was closed. There was no man. I quickly bounded off the bed and went for the door. It was locked. Nobody could have entered it without a key, and the hallway? Empty. I passed the rest of the night fully clothed, sitting up in bed, and with the light on. Though I paid for 2 more nights, at 7 a.m. I gathered all my stuff and went down to the reception desk to check out. "By the way," I said to the 20-something receptionist, "my roommate never returned. I'm a little concerned." She picked up the room key, looked at it hard, frowned, and then glanced at her computer. "What room were you in again?" When I repeated it to her, she looked back at her screen. "Ma'am, that room's been empty for 3 weeks, and it's been clean since then. We only have 6 people in the whole building." The hostel has since been renovated and is now a luxury hotel. I realized that we didn't physically meet, but I thought it relevant since I seemed to have met someone. Someone entered and left my room.